Okay, thank you everyone. We're gonna go ahead and get started with BrainWorks. So before I kick things off, so you guys got to hear about the markets from John, and then you got a bunch of pop quizzes from Michael, and then now you have a homework assignment sitting right in front of you. So we're really bringing you back to grade school here. So what you'll see in front of you is our BrainWorks workbook, which is a lot more detailed than what I'm going to be going through during this presentation. But so why BrainWorks, right? So we work really hard to accumulate all this wealth throughout our life, and then once retirement happens, what typically happens sometimes is we'll see a little bit of cognitive decline once you remove yourself from that work situation. So with that decline in cognitive abilities, we decided to put together this program that could go through some ways to help train your brain so that you could stay sharp for your later years throughout retirement. So we want to really keep our brain strong so that we could prevent that cognitive decline. So over the course of this presentation, we're going to be going through why training your brain is so important, what do we do, and then how do we do it. So before we jump right into that, I'm going to quickly introduce myself and my company. So my name is Christian Colantuoni. I am the local representative for Janus Henderson Investors, based here in Kansas City. My wife and I have lived in Kansas City since 2015. We have a 7-year-old son and a 4-year-old daughter. And Janus Henderson Investors is located in Denver, Colorado for our U.S. home office. And we have approximately $450 billion in assets under management across equities, fixed income, and alternatives. And that's in the form of mutual funds, ETFs, as well as private investment vehicles. So here at Janus Henderson, we have this team that we call the Specialist Consulting Group, which is about 30 members, and they're all subject matter experts. And they put together presentations like this, and they constantly create content to help add some value to all of our end clients like yourself. So let's start with talking about brain drain. So our current world is perfectly set up to drain our brains of our mental energy. From constantly putting out fires at work to concerns around tariffs, inflation, and geopolitical events, this often causes us to compromise our health, happiness, and performance. And this could even include something as simple as frequently looking at your cell phone. So this actually depletes our brain of a motivation and reward hormone called dopamine, which explains why we become programmed to check our cell phones throughout the day. And doing so, it motivates and rewards us. And because our bodies use dopamine for other purposes besides motivation and reward, things such as stress response, memory, focus, and sleep, you can see how this simple activity of frequently checking your cell phone can drain your brain. Another thing that's not helping is multitasking, right? So multitasking is something that everybody tries to do, and nobody does it well, but it is very demanding on our resources, and this causes a system overload to occur, and this could be stressful, which then that stress could become chronic, which is literally toxic to the brain. So according to medical professionals at Harvard, it's estimated that over 60% of all doctor's visits are stress-related. So we've all heard of cognitive decline. Cognitive decline, is a part of the aging process. And there's a spectrum within that decline that is actually within your control based on how you choose to live your life. In fact, it's estimated that up to 70% of it is actually in your control. The top factors that aren't are things like age and genetics, but these factors that are under your control are things like diet, activity levels, stress management, sleep, social engagement, mental training, and diseases like diabetes and heart disease. So in order to perform at our best and to stay healthy and fit over time, we need to create a training plan for our brains that will help keep us strong, resilient, and able to age successfully. So much like putting together a financial plan for your retirement or your estate, it's just as important to put together a financial plan for brain health because it holds us accountable. So we'll be covering 3 steps for brain fitness. The first one is setting the right foundation. So we'll touch on what we call the foundational Fab 5. Next, we'll go through building cognitive fitness, similar to elements of physical fitness. This includes things like flexibility, strength, and endurance. And then next, we'll talk about developing your training program. So before we can improve our cognitive fitness, we need to set the right foundation. And that's where the Fab 5 comes into play. Each one of these elements will help create the right brain connections. The first one is food is fuel. The next one is activity is activating. The third is balanced stress is a balanced life. Fourth is social life is life support. And then also resting is working. So we'll briefly touch on these 5 in the coming slides. And we'll also go into a lot more detail on these 5 components in that BrainWorks workbook that I put on your tables. So we're going to also encourage each of you in your free time to go through the brain assessment and then figure out which of the Fab 5 you think you would want to focus on. So starting with food is fuel. So what happens when you eat too little, right? Usually low energy, moody, impatient, sometimes unfocused. And what actually happens to the body is it ends up trying to conserve, so it conserves fat and it burns muscle, because muscle is more, calorie intensive, which leads to slower metabolism. The other end of that spectrum is what happens when you eat too much and you're overfueled. Well, you're typically tired, sleepy, and unmotivated. So the key is to find the right balance there. And so we always recommend to eat light and eat often, and then to make sure that you're eating portions of like well-balanced meals. So good examples are like 2 handfuls of grains, 2 handfuls of fruits or veggies, and 1 handful of protein. And then to also add in some power foods because they're nutrient dense, full of antioxidants, so they could help you stay energized, but then also give your body the proper fuel to recover. So some good examples there are things like, berries, leafy greens, nuts, and seeds. So activity is activating. So remember that the brain requires healthy circulation in order to get glucose and oxygen to the brain for energy. So the longer people sit, they're higher risk of many health-related issues, and just walking around increases breathing and heart rate, which will then increase blood flow, energy production, and waste removal. So exercise has been shown to stimulate the production of many different hormones necessary for cognitive functioning, which some experts consider to be miracle-grow for the brain. Another benefit is that exercise has been shown to increase cerebral blood vessels, and it also may have the same effect of lifting depression as taking antidepressant medication, but with none of the side effects. So keep in mind that our survival instincts actually steer us to conserve energy, basically eat more and move less. So we have to train our brains to see movement as a benefit that's worth the upfront investment. So putting in the effort periodically now will equate to more over time. And a very simple comparison there is saving in a 401k plan for retirement, right? It doesn't seem like each paycheck you're doing much, but then, you fast forward decades and you have a nice little nest egg there. So balanced stress is a balanced life. So stress can be good, right? Stress motivates us to do things like hit deadlines for work, get out of bed in the morning to provide for your family, to protect your family, right? But our brains are only designed to deal with stress that lasts for about 30 seconds or less. So stress that's immediate, it's acute, and only lasts for that short period of time, that's ideal, because you'll do something physically to burn off the hormones that are produced and the excess glucose in your body. But chronic stress actually stimulates hormones like cortisol, which are not quickly flushed through your system, and they can cause long-term damage. And the issue is that chronic stress can damage your memory, your executive function, motor skills, immune response, and sleep. And the problem there is that if sleep is interrupted, the body and the brain are unable to put together the pieces into place that are needed to repair the system, which could lead to a system-wide breakdown over time. So when we depart today, think about what you can do in your daily life to relieve your stress. So a few examples are, turning off the news. That seems like a pretty obvious one. That seems to be something that triggers a lot of stress. The other thing is to listen to comedy, right? If you have a favorite comedian, dial that up in the evening. Another one is trying to create a habit of, turning off your cell phone, just actually physically turning it off. And then obviously things like, going for a walk or, dropping down and doing 10 push-ups, something like that could help, relax you over time. So the fourth part of the Fab Five is resting is working. So studies have actually shown that animals and humans have, that their brain activity during the day is actually reactivated overnight while they sleep. And your brain is actually consolidating memory. So just like muscles in the body, the connections in our brain require rest and actually do the work of forming stronger pathways, rebuilding and repairing. So this is a question for you all, but how many people here have a bedroom, have a TV in their bedroom? Quite a few, myself included. So there's actually studies that show that blue light devices, like TVs and smartphones, are contributing to what they're calling a sleep drought because they actually affect your sleep-wake cycle. So a couple things to try to get better sleep is obviously using things like heavy drapes and earplugs to put yourself in the right position to not be interrupted. But if you're not willing to take the TV out of the bedroom, which I know I'm not, they actually suggest that you could wear blue light blocking glasses for at least an hour or so before bed, and that helps with that sleep awake rhythm cycle. So last one, but definitely not least, a social life is life support. So when we work, we're spending, believe it or not, 70% of our waking time with our coworkers, and then we lose that connection when we retire. So a recent Harvard study found that a lack of relationships increased the risk of all causes of death by all causes by 50%. So they're comparing that to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So basically, it's really beneficial to build and maintain friendships throughout our lifetimes, especially in retirement. So if you're looking for ways to increase your social time with friends, think about joining like a health club or even a book club. And then you're constantly interacting. So we just talked about the Fab Five for brain health and the foundation to keeping your brain sharp. So next we'll talk about how to build your cognitive fitness. So similar to exercising a muscle, we're going to want to work on things like flexibility, strength, and endurance. So we're going to start with flexibility here. So have any of you guys seen this test here? It's called the Stroop test. So this is pretty interesting. So this is used to measure cognitive flexibility and performance. So we're going to take a few seconds here quickly and just see how fast you could read through this list of words. So you can read it yourself. I'll give you a few seconds, and then I'm going to read it out loud. Is everybody done? Okay. Blue, red, yellow, orange, green, blue, purple, yellow, red, blue, orange, blue, yellow, red, green, orange, blue, purple, yellow, blue, orange. Pretty simple. Obviously set up for success with that one because the colors in the background help out. So now we're going to take a few more seconds and try a different exercise here. So instead of trying to say the word, just try to say the color, right? So I'll give you about 20 seconds or so to go through this part here. Okay, so I'm going to give it a shot and try not to embarrass myself too bad. But we're just going for the colors here. Green, purple, orange, red, yellow, red, blue, green, orange, green, yellow, red, green, yellow, purple, blue, blue, purple, red, yellow, purple, blue, yellow, green. I think I was batting 1,000 there. Thank you. Thank you. So in studies of this experiment, it actually takes twice as long. So why does this matter, right? Like, you're not going to walk around and try to just like read the colors, not the words. But it speaks to like things like habit and like training the brain to be more flexible. So essentially, like, something as simple as reading is a habit, right? And changing habits are really hard, especially when you've been doing them for a really long time. So figuring out like different ways to do things, like a funny example is like if you're right-handed and you've brushed your teeth for 60 years with your right hand, like try it with your left, right? And just think about like that kind of exercise, and that's the kind of stuff that just keeps the brain engaged and helps with that flexibility training. So another part of flexibility training is basically like trying to like change your perspective, right, on certain things. So raise your hand if you see like terror, someone clinging to this edge, right, thinking like they're gonna fall down off of this big cliff. Raise your hand. Okay, perfect. So what about excitement, exhilaration, accomplishment? Like this person's finishing the rock climb of his life, right? So we're all naturally, like survival instincts train us to like, be more cautious. So we think of like the negative in a situation like that, right? So a part of flexibility training is to try to train your mind to focus on the positive instead of the negative when you can catch yourself, right? So your workbook will go through some more examples of flexibility training, but one of them is like gratitude lists in the morning, right? Writing down 3 to 5 things that you're happy about. End of day journaling, kind of recapping your day, like what were some of your highlights. Different types of relaxation techniques like meditation that slows down the brain, and even yoga. Storytelling, and I'll also practice storytelling, right? So if you thought something was funny, sit down, write it out and come up with a story so you could deliver the punchline to your friends next time you see them. And then the emotional training game, which is similar to this one here, where if you see something, it upsets you, try to think of the positive in the situation. And the more you do that, the more you'll be optimistic going forward. So moving on from like flexibility to strength. So just like lifting weights strengthens your muscles, strengthening our mental muscles actually improves our memory, attention, brain speed, people skills, intelligence, and navigation. So let's quickly touch on a little memory exercise. So a lot of things there on the screen, but have you ever thought about like why certain things are easy to remember and certain things are just hard to remember for you? So this exercise here kind of touches on that concept. So take a good 10 seconds or so, and I don't know if you guys have pens in front of you, but maybe try to remember like 2 or 3 of these different pictures here. And sorry, I just took that away from you. But while you're looking at that and thinking about it, so think about, like just maybe not like only why you're remembering certain things, but why do you think you potentially forget certain things? Oh, getting ahead of myself here. Okay. So here are the pictures again. So how did you do with grabbing 2 or 3 things? Now looking back on the screen. So what do you recall about the 2 or 3 things that you remember, right? So typically you'll remember something because of things like relevance, right? Related to you. Like maybe you remembered the dog on the screen with the ball in his mouth because you have a dog, or maybe you remembered like the latte in the top right corner because you really look forward to your morning cup of coffee every day, or that beach picture because you were recently on vacation down in the Caribbean and it reminds you of that beach. But try to, like, for some of the things that maybe you don't remember, try thinking about creating a story to try to remember that by. So, like for an example here, this child, it looks like playing the piano. Like you could say like, oh, hey, I remember this one time I saw this child prodigy playing the piano, right? And it'll connect the dots there. I'm actually going to use a Federer and Nadal reference too. It's funny that Michael said that. But that was the story I put down there. It was like, oh yeah, I remember that tennis ball because I once saw that Federer and Nadal match. And then on the flip side, try to when it comes to memory, try to think about things that you remember and things you need to remember, right? If it's something that you could just write down and recall it, then try to do that, because you don't want to waste up like too much of that mental energy remembering things that you could easily go and find. Because organizing our thoughts and creating systems to have easy access to this information saves us mental space in our brain, so we can only remember what we really need to. So a couple of other different strength training exercises, and it goes in more detail in the brochure. Things like mental games, so think about puzzles, right? The caveat there is it must be new. Like, you can't just keep doing the same crossword puzzle. The other thing is, brain games. So some good examples there are things like Sudoku or chess. That helps, strength train the brain. Visualization is key. So this is actually something that elite athletes do. They'll visualize how they want the game to go, or they'll visualize how they want the golf shot to go. Another thing is scripting, which is very similar to visualization, besides you just write it down. And the key there is to try to be as vivid as possible with the details. Another one that we put down there is distraction resistance. So I actually tried this when I was going through this presentation, but basically try to set a timer and put your phone away, or put your notifications on silent, and see how long you could actually keep focused on whatever task you're trying to do. And the other thing I would add would be, if you like to read books, a good way to strengthen the mind is to pick a genre that you don't typically gravitate towards. So let's just say you typically like to read, financial books, which probably no one in this room besides a few of those guys back there and myself and Brent here at the front. Maybe pick up a sci-fi book the next time around. So the last step there is going to be endurance training, and we're just going to kind of skip right through to some of the examples. It goes into more detail in your workbook there. But in order to get the biggest return on your time and energy, aim for activities that do both build and also incorporate strength training and flexibility exercises, and try to do those over an extended period of time. So again, some cross-training type of examples combining the strength and endurance together is journaling every morning, like I mentioned, or every evening, meditation. And the key to meditation is, kind of sounds like hippie-ish, but it actually helps slow down the brain, and it increases your brain's ability to process information because you're putting your brain in a calm mental state. Yoga is a really good one, and the reason for that is yoga is not only mentally challenging, but it's physically challenging. So it's a really good thing, and then each yoga class you go to is never the same as the prior one. Visualization, again, is another great way to build endurance, helps you organize information, and the key is to imagine those scenes vividly with as much detail as possible. So last part of the presentation here is how to develop your own training program. So very similar to how you wouldn't try to open up a business without a business plan, or start an exercise regime without a workout program and a nutritional plan, designing a training plan for your brain is no different, and we've outlined how to do that in the presentation there. Oh, you don't need to see investment analytics tonight. You've already seen a few of those. So, okay, so some keys there to developing your training program. So first, it must be specific, right? No goal is ever going to be worth it if it's not specific. You're not going to stick to it. Next is it must be new, novel, and challenging to actually stimulate growth. And it must be practiced consistently to maintain the fitness benefits. So last thing I'll leave you with is how to take action, right? Because we've already established, and we all know this, that brain health is very important. It's critical for us to take action so we don't suffer from the atrophy. So even small steps can make a big difference. As I mentioned, what's good is our wealth. What good is our wealth if we don't have our brain health to enjoy it? So a good place to begin is by completing the exercises in your workbook. You could even designate accountability partner to help you when implementing your training plan, because the added bonus to that is to actually have more social connection, which we talked about the importance of that earlier in the presentation. And you'll also be helping out a friend or a family member in that process. And last but not least, don't forget to reach out to your friends at Caliber Wealth Management with any questions you have. So thank you all.